Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a candlelit hall of stone, the year etched firmly into memory. 437, in a kingdom somewhere between the whispering forests of Central Europe and the shadow of the Holy Roman Empire. The banners of the crown hang limp in the stale winter air, their once bright dyes faded by smoke. You stand at the edge of the Queen's court, where noblemen mutter behind gloved hands and servants exchange glances too nervous to hold. The smell of tallow smoke, unwashed furs, and overcooked meat clings to the rafters. And here, at the heart of it all, sits a queen whose name you already know is destined for scandal. Her crown gleams, but the whispers are louder than the music. They say she sleeps not beside her husband, but beside demons. You hear the gossip slip like daggers between silken sleeves. Some claim she summons lovers from the fire. Others swear they've seen claw marks on her skin. This is not the sort of rumor you survive easily. In a court where plague, famine, and politics already stalk every feast, to be accused of consorting with demons is to carry a death sentence before any judge ever speaks. You probably won't survive this, unless you are very, very lucky. If you're drawn to forbidden histories like this one, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Tonight's story is The Witch Queen Who Slept with Demons. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's awake with us while the candles burn low. So stay close, because in the glow of the hearth, the story begins. The queen you follow now did not begin her reign shrouded in whispers. She had arrived in this hall through the usual, respectable channels. A noble birth, an advantageous marriage, a ceremony as dazzling as any in Christendom. Yet from the first weeks of her queenship, something about her manner, perhaps too independent, too learned, too unwilling to bow to the clergy's every whim, began to seed unease. A woman of power already walked a knife's edge in the 15th century. Add in her collection of books, her reliance on midwives instead of priests, her taste for long nights in private chambers, and suspicion blossomed like mould on damp bread. Whispers, once loosed, do not return to silence. At first they are subtle. The servant insists she heard footsteps at midnight when the king lay ill. A laundress swears a shift carried a scent of sulphur impossible to scrub clean. Then they spread. At banquets, men toast her beauty with a smirk that holds an edge. In the cloisters, monks repeat the tale that a queen who dallies with demons will bring a curse on the whole realm. Even children, playing in the streets, mimic the story with giggles and wide eyes. Don't touch her shadow or it will eat you. What makes these whispers so potent is not only their strangeness, but their timing. Across Europe, the fear of witches is reaching fever pitch. The plague has scarred villages, harvests have failed, and men of the cloth insist the devil prowls at every threshold. When cows miscarry, when hail ruins a vineyard, when a ship sinks without cause, people need someone to blame. And who better than the foreign-born queen, clever and self-possessed, who never quite fits the mold? You stand in the great hall on a feast day. The minstrels strum lutes, though their melodies do little to cover the hissing sound of rumour. She raises her cup, her gaze steady, but you notice her hand tremble just slightly, whether from cold or from the weight of eyes upon her. You cannot say. A nobleman leans across the table, whispering something that makes his companion smirk. The words float to you. Succubus. It lands with the weight of accusation. By nightfall, the stories have grown. Some claim she disappears into her chambers with a shadow taller than any man. Others insist that when the candles gutter out, they hear voices not her own, a guttural language that slithers like smoke through the cracks of the door. One fool even swears he saw her walking barefoot in the snow without leaving footprints. Proof enough, he says, that she is carried by demons. You shake your head at the absurdity, but here's the catch. Absurdity does not protect you. In an age where science barely whispers and superstition shouts, the stranger the tale, the quicker it spreads. A rumor about poison needs evidence. A rumor about demons needs only fear, and fear, in this court, is abundant. Think of the atmosphere as a stew gone sour. Every new tale is another turn of the spoon, bringing the foulness to the surface. The clerics, already uneasy with a queen who consults midwives more than priests, find confirmation of their sermons in the gossip. The nobles, jealous of her influence, see a weapon ready for use. And the people, desperate for entertainment and explanation alike, carry the story from hearth to hearth. Tonight, as you wander the gallery and watch the shadows dance along the walls, you realize the queen herself cannot be unaware. Every glance, every hushed laugh is a blade turned her way. She sits taller, speaks with calm authority, but her eyes flick now and then toward the corners where the shadows gather. Perhaps she has learned, as all rulers do, that the deadliest weapons are not swords but whispers. And so, the accusation begins not with a proclamation but with a murmur. The queen sleeps with demons. Once said, it cannot be unsaid. And once believed, it cannot be disproved. The court is ready, the stage is set, and the story of the witch queen begins in earnest. Her crown may gleam under the flickering light of 100 candles, but the weight of lineage presses down harder than any circlet of gold. You trace her ancestry back through scrolls and whispered chronicles, a noble house of landowners and soldiers, a family whose fortunes rose on careful alliances and the steady drip of dowries. From her mother she inherited poise, from her father a stubborn streak that made even bishops hesitate before speaking against her. She was never meant to live quietly. Her childhood, filled with tutors in Latin, herbs, and the art of estate management, prepared her for the duties of rule long before her wedding day. The marriage that placed her on the throne was not born of passion, but of politics. The king, greying yet vigorous enough to command respect, needed the union as much as she. Their vows were exchanged beneath the cathedral's vaulting arches, the incense heavy, the choirs thundering hymns that echoed through stone. You can almost feel the cold marble underfoot, as the congregation gazed at the new queen, marveling at her composure. To the people, she embodied grace. To the clergy, she represented hope for heirs. To the nobles, she was a piece on the chessboard, to be watched and perhaps toppled. At first, the marriage seemed ordinary by royal standards. The king held the reins of state. She managed the domestic court, presiding over ladies, appointing stewards, arranging feasts, and dispensing charity. But ordinary marriages rarely generate stories of demons, and you sense already that this queen would not settle for invisibility. Her intellect shone too brightly in conversation. Her curiosity strayed too easily into matters deemed unsuitable for women. Astronomy, medicine, the secret properties of plants. Her chambers were not just filled with tapestries and gowns, but with manuscripts copied from Arabic texts, jars of dried roots, and a few suspicious vials of powder. Even her manner with the king unsettled courtiers. She spoke not only with deference but with insistence, offering counsel where silence was expected. At times, she corrected him gently before others. No queen was supposed to display such confidence. No woman, some muttered, should display such learning. You hear the irritation behind their compliments, the way flattery drips into resentment. Still, for a time, her position was secure. The king admired her wit, and he tolerated her eccentricities. He even indulged her interests, allowing scholars and alchemists into her chambers, permitting her long walks in cloisters where others expected embroidery and prayer. It is easy to imagine him charmed by her self-possession, perhaps amused by her determination to command respect in a world reluctant to give it. But royalty lives in a glass house. Every habit is observed, every gesture noted. When she skipped vespers one too many evenings, the priests noticed. When she requested physicians versed in both scripture and pagan herbs, the whispers grew. When she gifted a courtier a talisman against fever, a harmless charm, really, a pressed flower stitched into cloth, it was taken as a sign of hidden arts. The nobles watched closely, waiting for cracks. A barren marriage, a failed harvest, an illness in the palace. Any misfortune might be laid at her feet. Her lineage, once praised, became a weapon. She is not truly of our people, they said. Her blood carries foreign taint. That alone was often enough to brand a woman as suspect, especially when her household included midwives from the countryside and servants who spoke in dialects the priests disdained. It is here, in this fragile balance, that her life begins to tilt. The royal marriage gives her status and power, but it also paints a target on her back, and the court, restless for scandal, sharpens its arrows. At banquets, her smile appears serene, but you notice her eyes flicker toward the corners of the hall, where rivals gather in clusters. At processions, when she lifts her veil, you see the glances exchanged between bishops, their mouths tightening as though tasting bitterness. Even the king's affection, steady at first, begins to waver under the constant drip of rumour. And so you stand beside her in the gilded chamber, where tapestries show saints driving out devils, and realize the irony. She, a queen born of noble lineage and married into legitimacy, is already being painted in whispers as the very opposite of those saintly women. Her crown grants her authority, but in the same breath it exposes her. The higher you climb, the easier it is for others to push you into the fire. The whispers do not roar at first. They creep, they slither, they coil around the rafters like smoke from damp wood. You notice them first among the servants, because servants are always the pulse of a palace. A maid claims she heard her mistress's footsteps at midnight, not soft like slippers, but heavy as though dragging something across stone. The scullery boy swears he smelled burning pitch outside her chamber long after the hearths were banked. The laundress mutters that a shift sent down from the queen's chamber carried a stench she cannot describe, half perfume, half sulphur. The court is a hive, and rumour is honey-laced with poison. You hear the buzzing everywhere. One day it is a tale of strange visitors in dark cloaks, slipping through side doors under moonlight. Another day it is a claim that she speaks words no one understands, syllables borrowed from some far-off land. Soon, the tales grow bolder. She is seen with a book of leather so black it drinks the candlelight, or with powders that hiss when dropped into water. You look closer and realize how small truths, her study of herbs, her collection of manuscripts, become monstrous in retelling. The first rumours always sprout in fertile soil. This queen is young, foreign, curious, unwilling to bow her head. All these qualities are enough to spark suspicion, but what gives the gossip real fire is timing. The king falls ill one winter, pale and shivering beneath furs. The physicians argue, the priests pray, but his fever lingers. And what is easier for frightened courtiers to believe, that the body is frail, or that the queen has cursed him to hasten her own power? You sit at the feast table one evening, the hall noisy with music, yet your ears pick out a single word tossed across the trestles: succubus. It lands like a dropped knife. Men chuckle, women hide smiles behind goblets. The word spreads faster than spilled wine. By morning it is repeated by scribes in corridors, by children in kitchens, even by beggars outside the cathedral gates. Stranger details begin to graft themselves onto the story. A chambermaid insists she saw claw marks across the queen's shoulders when she bathed. A guard confesses that he heard two voices within her chamber, one human and one not. The guard's tale changes with every telling. Sometimes the voice is deep and booming. Sometimes it is a hiss like wind in a chimney. But consistency matters less than thrill. People crave the drama of the forbidden. You walk through the cloisters, past statues of saints, with downcast eyes, and hear monks whisper that she keeps demons as lovers. They cite scripture, they nod knowingly, and their certainty is intoxicating to anyone who listens. The bishop warns that a queen who lies with demons will bring ruin on the kingdom, her womb tainted, her touch poisonous, and even those who doubt the story still repeat it, because repetition itself is power. What fascinates you is how quickly the human mind reshapes the ordinary into the uncanny. A sleepless night becomes evidence of nocturnal rites. A taste for foreign spices becomes proof of trafficking with infidels. A bruise on the arm, perhaps from bumping a chest, becomes the mark of a demon's grip. Once suspicion has a foothold, everything feeds it. Even the king begins to waver. He had defended her once, praising her wit, but as his health falters, he listens to his counselors. They remind him of Samson undone by Delilah, of Solomon swayed by foreign wives, of Adam toppled by Eve. You almost pity him, torn between affection and fear, his mind a tug of war rope held by men who benefit if the queen is cast down. The queen walks through the hall with her head held high, yet you see her isolation. The ladies who once clustered at her side drift away. The courtiers bow too deeply, as if mocking obedience. Even the servants grow timid, as though afraid her glance might scorch them. And all the while, the rumours sharpen. Not only does she lie with demons, some say, but she commands them to whisper in her ear, guiding her counsel, poisoning the king's will. You realize then the cruelest truth of all. It hardly matters whether any of it is real. In this world, belief is stronger than fact, and belief once seeded grows wild. You begin to notice that rumors never thrive on their own. They require gardeners, men and women with sharp eyes and sharper ambitions. In the Queen's court, rivals sprout like weeds between paving stones, and each is eager to water the seed of scandal. Her enemies do not always look like enemies. Some arrive smiling, cloaked in courtesy, offering compliments with barbed undertones. The Duke of Moravia bows low, praising her wisdom while whispering to others that wisdom in a woman often conceals deceit. The bishop nods gravely at her charity, only to hint that the poor prefer bread to charms whispered over loaves. They understand that accusations of witchcraft of demon consorts are not merely spiritual, they are political daggers. The clergy, already unsettled by her independence, are quick to seize opportunity. You overhear priests mutter that she skips vespers too often, that her prayers are too short, her questions too many. When she dares ask why heaven punishes the innocent with plague, the room stiffens. To question the logic of suffering is to question divine order itself, and so her curiosity, harmless in truth, becomes one more stone in the pile against her. Among the nobles, ambition bubbles like wine left too long in the cask. The Queen controls the royal household, the appointments of servants, the flow of gifts and pensions. Every rival wants those reins loosened. What better way than to paint her as unfit, tainted, dangerous? To call her adulterous with demons is to shake her throne without ever lifting a sword. The whispers spread outward like ripples. You hear of a baron's wife, slighted at court, who tells her circle that the Queen carries secret lovers unseen by human eyes. You hear of a monk, humiliated when she corrected his reading of scripture, who now insists her knowledge comes from infernal sources. Each grievance, no matter how petty, attaches itself to the greater story. Soon, even those who bear her no ill will repeat the accusation simply because everyone else does. You cannot ignore the role of fear. This is an age when demons are not metaphors. They are believed to walk among men, to crouch at bed's end, to whisper blasphemies in the dark. Clerics thunder from pulpits that women are gateways to corruption. Their bodies weak, their wills easily bent. The image of Eve handing the apple has been painted so often that even illiterate peasants know its shape. And so when a queen dares to show strength, it feels safer for her enemies to declare that strength borrowed from hell rather than born of her own mind. You stand in the council chamber one evening. As accusations take firmer shape, a noble suggests discreetly that the queen's failure to conceive an heir might not be natural, but diabolic. Another claims he has heard chants in her chambers at midnight. The king frowns, torn between loyalty and doubt, while the councillors trade glances like hunters scenting prey. Outside, the people join the chorus. Peasants whisper that her shadow moves when she stands still. Bakers claim her presence sours yeast. A farmer swears his cow gave birth to a calf with twisted legs after glimpsing her procession. No one checks whether the calf had stumbled in the field. The story is too useful to discard. You realize something chilling. Enemies need not invent much. They need only collect accidents, twist them, and present them as proof. And once the clerics nod, the people believe, and the nobles grin behind their goblets. The queen is trapped in a net she cannot cut. And so you watch her walk through the hall, her gown brushing the rushes, her chin lifted. She must know every gaze weighs her down, every whisper coils around her crown like smoke. Yet she keeps walking, steady as if daring the court to speak openly. Few do. They prefer the safety of shadows, letting rumors ripen until the day they burst into accusation. The rivals sharpen their blades, but they do not rush. They know patience will make the wound deeper. For now, they let the queen live beneath the growing cloud, her every gesture feeding the tale that she shares her bed with demons. You slip into the queen's chambers one quiet evening, not literally of course, but through the eyes of those who pry and whisper. The air is thick with scents unfamiliar to most courtiers: crushed rosemary, smoke from juniper twigs, the tang of powdered minerals ground into bowls of bronze. Her tables are crowded not only with the usual embroidery frames and prayer books, but with items that spark nervous wonder: jars of dried roots, bundles of herbs tied in twine, small knives not meant for war but for cutting plants. And there, half hidden behind carved chests and velvet curtains, you glimpse the most dangerous objects of all: books. Not the safe, sanctioned psalters chained in the cathedral library, but manuscripts copied from Arabic treatises, volumes with diagrams of stars and notes about the properties of metals in a century when most noblemen can barely sign their names. The sight of a woman leafing through pages of astrology or alchemy is enough to set teeth on edge. You hear courtiers mutter that such books are gateways to heresy, the ink itself tainted with demonic script. Of course, what she studies might be nothing more than medicine. You see recipes for poultices, lists of herbs that ease childbirth, instructions for distilling waters from roses or mint. Knowledge like this could save lives. But in an anxious court, the same knowledge becomes dangerous. If a fever breaks, the queen is praised for her healing touch. If a child dies, her remedies are blamed as poison. The balance tips according to fear, not fact. Hidden cabinets hold stranger things still. Vials of mercury, powders that fizz when dropped in wine, charms sewn into little pouches. To a modern eye, these are the tools of early science, experimental medicine, even folk tradition. To her contemporaries, they are unmistakable signs of forbidden craft. A talisman meant to ward off fever looks suspiciously like a demon's pact. A stone with odd markings becomes a sigil of hell. You hear of one courtier who swore she saw the queen pressing a dried toad into a child's hand as a charm against plague. Another claims that her candles burn with a blue flame because they are mixed with unholy fat. None of them pause to ask whether herbs might change a flame's colour, or whether the queen is simply practicing what midwives have done for centuries. The explanation of demons is always more thrilling. Even her pets come under scrutiny. A black cat lounging on her windowsill is suddenly proof of a familiar spirit. A tame raven, taught to mimic words, is said to croak prophecies from hell. It would almost be funny if it weren't so deadly serious. After all, jokes about witches can end with real fires in the square. The queen, for her part, does not hide these curiosities. Perhaps she believes her position protects her. Perhaps she simply refuses to shrink herself into ignorance, to please men who fear what they do not understand. You watch her move about the chamber, selecting a vial here, turning a page there, her movements calm and practiced. She is not ashamed of her learning, but the more openly she displays it, the more ammunition she hands to her enemies. You notice how even servants grow cautious. A maid sent to fetch linen whispers that she saw symbols chalked on the floor. A steward claims he heard chanting behind closed doors. Small exaggerations swell into dangerous narratives. Soon the queen is no longer seen as a patron of learning, but as a mistress of the occult. The irony is bitter. Knowledge that could ease suffering is turned into proof of alliance with demons. And in a court hungry for scandal, a woman with too many books, too many powders, too much independence, is always only one rumor away from the stake. The first summons to answer questions does not come as a public thunderclap. It arrives quietly, like a letter slipped beneath a door. You picture her sitting at a carved oak desk, the parchment spread before her, the inked words polite yet edged. Her Majesty is requested to clarify certain practices for the peace of the realm and the salvation of her soul. She knows, of course, that clarify is a trap. Still, she cannot refuse. A queen who ignores the church invites open war, and besides, she believes naively perhaps that reason will shield her. You walk with her into the chamber where clerics wait, their robes heavy, their faces solemn, the torches sputter against damp stone. A crucifix looms overhead, its shadow long across the table. The questions begin soft. They ask about her books. She explains. Some are treatises on herbs, copied from foreign scholars, meant to cure the sick. They ask about her powders. She answers. Simples to ease childbirth, powders to stop bleeding. They ask about the midnight gatherings. She replies. She consults physicians and scholars. Nothing more. Each answer, calm and direct. But you see how the scribes scratch her words down with eager strokes, twisting them before the ink is dry. A charm to ease childbirth becomes evidence of unnatural meddling in God's creation. A meeting with scholars becomes a midnight convocation. To speak is to surrender one's words for reshaping. And then inevitably the pressure increases. They ask whether she has lain with demons. She laughs at first. It seems absurd. A child's tale, but her laughter echoes wrong in the chamber, and the clerics frown. They repeat the question, firmer, reminding her of the salvation of her soul. Does she not know that the devil disguises himself as an angel of light? Does she not fear that her midnight visitors are demons in fair form? You see the net tightening? She denies, of course, but denial is written down as obstinacy. Obstinacy is proof of guilt, and when words do not bend, methods sharpen. A guard grips her wrist too tightly as she leaves, leaving a bruise. Later, they will call it a demon's mark. Days turn into weeks, and the sessions grow harsher. At first they rely on persuasion. Long sermons about Eve's weakness, warnings of eternal damnation, pleas to confess for the sake of her immortal soul. But when persuasion fails, coercion waits at the door. Sleep is shortened, meals are delayed, servants loyal to her vanish from the palace, replaced by those loyal to her accusers. The silence grows heavy. Under duress, any word can be shaped into confession. One night, exhausted, she mutters that she is tormented by shadows in her dreams. The scribe seizes on it. She admits nightly visitations. Another time, desperate to stop the questioning, she says she feels cursed by her enemies. They twist it. She acknowledges infernal bonds. Each phrase, dragged from her lips, is sharpened into a blade against her. You stand by helplessly as her composure frays. Her eyes darken with sleeplessness. Her hands tremble when she lifts a cup. She tries to argue with reason that no demon has touched her, that her loyalty to her husband is unbroken, that her learning is meant for good, but reason is drowned in the hunger for spectacle. Clerics do not want explanations. They want a confession that justifies their warnings from the pulpit, and so the narrative begins to harden. She is not just a queen, she is a queen who has admitted to being troubled by shadows, to using powders, to keeping books not sanctioned by the church. In an age where suspicion is proof enough, this is all the evidence her enemies need. The cruelest part, she has not even truly confessed. They have only gathered fragments, sighs, muttered words twisted by exhaustion. But in the echoing halls of the court, those fragments will soon be proclaimed as certainty. The queen has confessed to lying with demons. The tales grow bolder now, stripped of hesitation, dressed in lurid detail. You sit among the crowd in the hall as witnesses are called, servants, guards, even supposed confidantes, each eager or pressured to add their piece. Their stories blend into one long nightmare, a portrait painted in shadow. One maid claims she heard moans through the queen's chamber door at midnight, low and unearthly, not the sound of any man. The steward swears that when he entered one morning, the sheets smelled of sulphur and smoke. Another insists she saw bruises in the shape of claws upon the queen's thigh, though whether she glimpsed or imagined them hardly matters. Each testimony builds upon the last until the room itself feels poisoned with certainty. You listen as one witness describes the demon lover, tall as a man, but with eyes glowing like embers and skin that shimmered in the dark. Another claims the figure was beast-like, horned, hooved, its voice a growl. Yet another swears it was beautiful beyond measure, so radiant it could only be Satan himself in disguise. The contradictions do not weaken the story, they strengthen it. For if demons can shift form, then every impossible tale is plausible. The queen herself sits silent, her face pale but steady. You wonder what goes through her mind as strangers describe her body in detail, as though they had stood at the foot of her bed. To deny is to invite more questions. To protest too strongly is to seem guilty. Silence, though dignified, is written as proof of shame. The most damning accusation comes from a confessor, a man of the cloth, who insists she revealed to him in confidence that she knew pleasures not of this world. He refuses to specify further, but the implication is clear. The crowd shudders, priests cross themselves, scribes scratch furiously. It does not matter whether the man lies. His words carry the weight of holy robes, and so the tale of demon lovers takes root. You hear it repeated in the streets, that the queen invited spirits into her bed, that she bore them willingly, that her beauty itself was evidence of unholy exchange. They call her succubus, enchantress, witch queen. Children whisper it as they play. Monks thunder it in sermons. Merchants spread it between transactions. The scandal is irresistible. What greater downfall than a queen, wife of a Christian king, bedding demons in secret? The descriptions grow ever more extravagant. One rumor claims she gave birth to a monstrous child, hidden away in the crypts. Another insists her skin glowed in the dark after a night of consorting. A third swears that when she touched holy water, it hissed as if boiling. You know, most listeners do not believe every detail, but belief is not required. What matters is repetition, and repetition makes truth. It is almost farcical. If it weren't so cruel, you catch yourself smirking when a witness claims she flew through the air on a stormy night, then sober quickly, because you know the jest will not save her. These stories, ridiculous as they sound, are chiseling away her humanity, turning her from queen to monster, and monsters can be destroyed without guilt. You glance at the king, sitting stiffly beside the judges. His knuckles whiten around his goblet. His jaw clenches. Perhaps he doubts. Perhaps he remembers her laughter, her counsel, her touch. But he says nothing. To defend her too loudly would be to share her suspicion, and so he lets the tide rise, silent as it drags his queen under. The people do not care whether the demon lovers are real. They crave the story, the thrill, the chance to see royalty dragged into scandal. It makes their world feel just a little more explainable. Misfortune is not random. It comes from demons in the queen's bed. And so you sit there, listening as her life is rewritten into myth, every whispered detail turning into testimony, every testimony into a noose. The clerics step forward now, no longer content with whispers. You watch as they gather in solemn assembly, their robes heavy with incense, their voices low but edged with certainty. An ecclesiastical investigation has begun, and once the church places its seal on a rumor, it swells into doctrine. They cite scripture with unshakable confidence. One reads from the writings of St. Augustine, warning that demons lust after women and seek to corrupt them in their sleep. Another quotes Thomas Aquinas, who reasoned that succubi collect seed from men and incubate it in women, thus spreading devilish offspring. You notice how their voices rise when they speak of dangers to the realm, as though lust itself were a siege weapon threatening the kingdom's walls. The investigation is methodical in appearance, though riddled with bias. They summon scribes to take down every statement, whether wild or measured, each line becoming evidence. They draw up lists of supposed signs, a bruise shaped like a claw, a strange mark on the skin, even freckles arranged in a curious pattern. These are not innocent blemishes now, but witches' marks, physical proof of the devil's embrace. You stand in the cloister as monks whisper about midnight noises. They bring forth servants who claim they saw shadows moving without a source, or flames that guttered blue when the queen walked past. The clerics nod gravely at each tale, never asking whether wind drafts or lamp oil might explain it. To them, natural answers only cloud the divine truth. The queen is summoned again, this time before bishops rather than mere priests. They ask about her foreign books. Are they not works of pagans? She replies that knowledge is not sinful, but their pens scratch faster, eager to capture her defiance. They ask about her herbs. Does she not know that only God grants healing? She replies that herbs are his creation, but they twist her words into blasphemy. The more she defends herself with reason, the more she seems obstinate against holy authority. You notice how the investigation is staged like a theatre. The bishops wear their finest vestments. The crucifix glimmers in torchlight. Relics are displayed on the table as though their presence forces truth. Each detail is calculated to impress the crowd, to show that the church speaks with God's authority while the queen, by contrast, is a mere mortal defending shadows. Soon the clerics expand their inquiry outward. They scour the countryside for tales of witchcraft, linking them to her name. If a farmer's cow dries up, it is the queen's fault. If hail ruins a vineyard, it is her curse. If a child dies in its cradle, surely the demon queen walks the halls at night. Each tragedy, once private grief, becomes another stone hurled at her. The investigation is not simply about faith, it is about control. The bishops know that if they convict her, they will remind the realm who holds the final word. Not kings, not queens, but the church. And the nobles, eager for advantage, happily provide witnesses. Everyone gains something from her downfall. Everyone except the queen herself. You realize that the line between inquiry and accusation has already been crossed. This is not an investigation searching for truth. It is a performance searching for guilt. And the script, though unwritten, already has its ending. The queen is weary, her face pale beneath its powder, but she gathers herself when given the floor. You watch as she rises in the hall, the weight of every gaze pressing against her. Even the air feels heavy, thick with the smoke of torches and the stench of sweat, as though the walls themselves hold their breath. She does not scream her innocence. She speaks it. Her voice is steady, measured, almost gentle, as if she believes calm reason can untangle the knot of fear surrounding her. She explains her books again, medical treatises, astrological notes copied from Arab scholars who preserved wisdom lost in Europe's wars. She argues that herbs and powders are not the devil's toys but the Creator's gifts drawn from the soil he made. She reminds them that her charity is real, that she has fed the poor, clothed orphans, comforted the sick. For a moment the chamber stills. Some eyes flicker with doubt. You sense that her poise, her rationality unsettles them. She is not the wild, shrieking witch of their sermons. She is dignified, articulate, regal, and dignity can be dangerous to those who crave her downfall. She dares even to invoke law. I am the king's anointed queen, she says, and no charge of shadow can strip me without proof. Her words echo in the vaulted chamber, strong as a hammer blow. You can almost see the judges flinch. She speaks not only to defend herself, but to remind them that if they destroy her without evidence, they weaken the very throne they serve. But reason, however polished, crashes like waves against stone walls. The clerics lean forward, lips pursed, their minds already fixed. They counter her with scripture, with sermons, with stories of Eve's temptation. They paint her reason as pride, her calm as stubbornness, her dignity as proof of alliance with hell. One bishop accuses her of mocking holy authority, her measured tone described as arrogance. Another declares that knowledge itself, when hidden from priests, is dangerous and therefore diabolic. A third insists that women are too weak to hold such power without the devil's hand to guide them. Each rebuttal is less about evidence than about reshaping her virtues into sins. She does not break. You notice her back straight, her chin lifted, though her hands tremble when she clasps them in prayer. She pleads for God to judge her heart, for truth to shine through the lies. For a fleeting instant, you believe her words might pierce the fog of fear. But then the murmurs begin. The crowd shifts, whispering, restless. The more eloquently she speaks, the more dangerous she appears to her enemies. After all, what is more frightening than a woman who commands language, who turns accusations back on the accusers? To them, her defense is not proof of innocence, but evidence of the devil's cunning. They mutter that demons give their servants silver tongues. You see the trap. If she falters, she is weak. If she argues, she is possessed. Silence damns her, and speech damns her too. By the end of the day, her defense has been noted, transcribed, and twisted. The scribes write that she persisted in obstinacy, that she refused to confess the truth, that she spoke with unnatural eloquence. Her reason, once her shield, is reshaped into another blade against her. Still, she walks back to her chambers, with head held high, refusing to bow. The people watch her pass, and some, even those who whispered against her, cannot help but admire her composure. But admiration is no protection. Her defense may echo in the hall, but the judgment has already begun to harden in men's hearts. You step beyond the stone walls of the palace now, into the muddy streets, where townsfolk gather in markets and taverns. It is here, among the smell of ale and the chatter of gossip, that the story of the Queen takes on its wildest life. The people do not attend the hearings, they rely on fragments, rumours, and sermons carried from pulpit to ear. Yet each retelling adds a new flourish, as though the tale itself were a living creature fattened on fear. You hear a baker insist that the queen's shadow once lingered on a wall after she walked past. A cobbler swears her eyes glow in moonlight. A washerwoman, crossing herself, mutters that her neighbour's child wasted away after being kissed by the queen at a procession. The public thrives on scandal. Royalty is distant, untouchable, yet when a queen is accused of lying with demons, she becomes a character in everyone's story. The townsfolk gossip with a mixture of horror and delight. They are terrified by the thought of demonic influence, but secretly thrilled that even the great and powerful can be dragged into the mud. Sermons in the cathedral pour fuel on the fire. Priests thunder from the pulpit that witches and whores of hell walk among the people, tempting kings, bringing down kingdoms. They never name the queen outright, but everyone knows the target. The congregation shifts nervously, crosses themselves, and carries the message home. Beware the woman in the palace who consorts with shadows. You linger at a tavern where merchants drink after a day's trade. One recounts, with relish, how a guard swore he saw the queen floating inches above her bed. Another insists she keeps a demon lover who wears the guise of a handsome knight. Their laughter is uneasy, but it spreads quickly. Fear shared aloud becomes entertainment, and entertainment becomes belief. Even children pick up the tale. They play games in alleys, shouting, "Don't let the demon queen catch you," as they chase one another with shrieks of laughter. Their parents scold them, then repeat the story anyway by firelight. In this way, myth seeps into bone, and the queen's reputation is lost long before any verdict is spoken. Among the common folk, fascination mingles with dread. Some whisper that she is cursed and must be destroyed. Others secretly find the idea intoxicating. This vision of a queen who defies priests, who wields power not given by men. But such thoughts are buried deep. For to admire her openly is to risk being branded a heretic too. The palace itself cannot ignore the tide. Courtiers hear the murmurs when they ride through the streets, the shouts of children, the nervous glances of merchants. They return with stories, repeating them in the hall, until the air inside the palace is as thick with rumour as outside. What was once whispered in corners now blazes in the open. The queen does not lie with her husband but with demons, and the kingdom suffers for it. You realise then how public opinion becomes a second court, louder than judges, crueler than bishops. For if the people believe their queen is cursed, how long before they demand justice? Justice in the form of fire. The queen may sit on her throne, poised and silent, but beyond those walls, her fate is already being tried in the marketplace. One whispered accusation at a time. You step back into the great hall, now transformed into a stage. The trial is no longer a hushed inquiry, but a spectacle, a performance meant to convince, not only the council and clergy, but the kingdom itself. Tapestries have been pulled aside, benches arranged in rows, a raised platform built so judges can sit, like saints gazing down from heaven. Candles drip wax onto the stone floor, their light throwing long, trembling shadows. The queen is led in, veiled and pale, yet regal still. She walks slowly, each step deliberate, as though she knows the entire hall watches for weakness. Chains are not upon her wrists, but the weight of every gaze serves as shackles enough. The judges, bishops, nobles, men of law array themselves like an audience of vultures. They clear their throats, unroll parchment, and announce the charges with the solemnity of a mass adultery with demons, heresy against God, poisoning the king's body and the kingdom's soul. Each word echoes as if carved into stone, though you know the charges are stitched from rumour and envy. Witnesses are paraded like actors in a morality play. A maid trembles as she repeats her tale of midnight moans. A guard bows as he insists he heard two voices in her chamber. A cleric describes her knowledge as unnatural, a gift no woman could possess without diabolic aid. The audience murmurs, nods, crosses themselves. They are not hearing testimonies. They are watching a story unfold, one they already believe the ending of. The queen rises to speak, her voice calm though her hands tremble. She reminds them of her charity, her loyalty to the king, her devotion to God. She calls her accusers liars, her judges unjust, her conscience clear. For a moment her words hang in the air like arrows. But then one bishop leans forward and declares, "The devil lends eloquence to his servants." The hall gasps, the scribes scratch furiously, and her defense becomes another stone in the wall against her. Theatrical flourishes abound. Relics are brought forth, a saint's finger bone, a fragment of the true cross, held high as the judges demand she swear her innocence upon them. When she does so without flinching, they murmur that demons lend their servants courage. If she had faltered, it would have been proof of guilt. Either way, she cannot win. Outside, the crowd grows restless, pressing against the doors. Rumors of the trial ripple outward like thunder. Merchants, peasants, even children gather to catch any scrap of news. The church understands this hunger and feeds it, crafting each session as a sermon in itself. They know the queen is already condemned in the public mind. The trial is less about verdict than about performance. And so you sit, watching the slow theatre of destruction. Every gasp from the gallery, every nod from the judges, every solemn word from the priests is part of the choreography. The queen is not a defendant. She is a role cast as the witch queen who bedded demons, and the play demands her downfall. You realize then that the verdict is already written. What remains is only the performance of inevitability. The play turns darker now. You sit in the chamber as they bring her again before the judges, not with the pageantry of relics and sermons this time, but with tools hidden beneath cloth. The spectacle shifts from words to pain. Torture, they call it gently, the question extraordinary. They insist it is not punishment, but purification, a means to draw truth from lips sealed by Satan himself. The room is smaller, low-ceilinged, its air heavy with iron and mildew. You see the instruments lined on the table, ropes, pulleys, wedges, iron boots, things designed not to kill but to shatter resolve. Clerics hover, murmuring prayers, their eyes fixed not on her pain but on the soul they believe they are saving. The queen is asked again, has she lain with demons? She denies. The ropes tighten, her arms strain as she is lifted, joints burning until her body dangles like a puppet. She cries out, not in confession, but in agony. The scribes write it anyway. She screamed the devil's name. You know she did not. Yet the pen is more merciless than any rack. Bruises bloom across her skin. Marks left by ropes, by iron, by the hard stone floor are catalogued by the clerics as witches' marks, signs of the devil's caress. Even her silence becomes suspect. When she faints, they call it Satan's trance. When she gasps for breath, they claim it is the devil speaking through her. There is no escape from interpretation. They press her about the powders in her chambers, the books on her shelves. Exhausted, delirious, she mutters half answers. Yes, she used herbs. Yes, she read forbidden words. Yes, she dreamed of shadows. Each fragment is seized as confession, pieced together like broken glass, until it cuts her clean through. You cannot help but notice the cruelty of logic here. Pain is said to drive out lies, but in truth it brings out whatever words the judges wish to hear. If she denies under torture, she is stubborn in sin. If she confesses, she is guilty. The process is not to find truth, but to sculpt guilt from flesh. Days pass like this, each session stealing more of her strength. She is carried back to her cell limp, her body marked, her spirit fraying. The king, you hear, does not attend. Perhaps he cannot bear it. Perhaps he dares not oppose it. Either way, his absence damns her, as surely as chains. Soon the evidence is stacked high. Her bruises are written as demons' embraces. Her mutterings under pain are transcribed as detailed confessions. Even accidents, burns from hot irons, cuts from ropes are displayed as proof that the devil brands his lovers. What was done to her becomes evidence against her. The chamber is hushed as the verdict is prepared, a silence thicker than any hymn. You stand among the spectators pressed against the walls, craning to see the judges as they gather their parchments. The bishops sit stiffly, their robes gleaming, their faces set in solemn gravity. Nobles lean forward, eager for the drama's end. Scribes dip quills, ready to record the words that will echo far beyond these walls. The queen is brought in, weary but still upright. Her hair hangs loose, her face drawn, yet she meets their gaze without lowering her eyes. The silence deepens as the chief judge clears his throat. One by one, the charges are read aloud: adultery with demons, heresy against God, betrayal of the marriage bed, poisoning the body politic. Each word is like a bell tolling over her life. When the accusations of sleeping with demons are spoken, the crowd shifts and murmurs, some crossing themselves, others smirking with satisfaction. It is no longer gossip. It is official doctrine, sanctified by parchment and seal. The verdict follows swiftly, as though rehearsed. Guilty. Her title stripped, her dignity declared forfeit, her soul pronounced in mortal peril. She is no longer queen in the eyes of church and court. She is a witch, a sinner, a consort of hell. The sentence is read with cold precision. Some argue she should burn, her body reduced to ash to purge the land of her stain. Others suggest exile, a quieter disgrace that still robs her of crown and kin. After much murmuring, the decision settles: public condemnation, followed by punishment fitting the spectacle they have crafted. You glance at the king. He sits stiff, his eyes fixed on nothing. He neither defends nor condemns, a statue carved from grief or fear. His silence is louder than words. He will not save her. Perhaps he cannot. Perhaps he dares not. The queen raises her voice, clear and resonant, even in defeat. She calls the judgment false, the evidence twisted, the verdict unjust. She swears before God she is lain with no demon, that her soul is her own. For a moment, her courage unsettles the hall, but the judge slams a gavel of wood upon the table, declaring her words further proof of rebellion. The scribes write the final line: the woman once crowned shall be condemned. The people outside roar when the news is spread. Some weep, believing truly that their queen betrayed them. Others cheer, thrilled to see high blood dragged down. A few whisper doubt, but they are drowned in the chorus. The story is too grand, too intoxicating, to question. You realize the cruel symmetry. She once walked into this hall as a bride, crowned in glory. Now she leaves it stripped of honor, marked as the witch queen, guilty of lying with demons. Her fall is complete, her enemies triumphant, her legacy twisted, and yet her gaze as she is led away is steady. Defiance burns faintly still, as if she knows that even in condemnation, her story will outlive the judges who wrote it. The sentence has been spoken. Now the punishment must be staged. You follow the procession from the stone halls into the open square, where scaffolds and pyres rise like grim monuments. The crowd swells, jostling for a glimpse, children hoisted on shoulders, vendors hawking bread and wine as though this were a festival. A queen's downfall is no small affair. It is theatre, and everyone has paid their coin in rumour to see it performed. She is led forward, clad not in silks but in coarse wool. Her hair, once arranged with jewelled pins, hangs loose across her shoulders. Chains clink at her wrists, though she walks steadily, her chin lifted. The crowd hushes for a moment, struck by the sight of a woman once crowned now stepping toward ruin. Then the murmurs resume. Some hiss curses, others mutter prayers, and a few, strangely, weep. If the sentence is fire, the pyre is already prepared. Stacked logs rise high, ropes ready to bind. Priests circle, chanting psalms, sprinkling holy water on the wood as if to cleanse it of the evil they believe it will consume. The smoke of incense mingles with the scent of pitch, stinging your eyes. If the sentence is exile, the stage is different but no less cruel. A ship waits at harbour, its sails stiff in the wind. Guards stand ready to march her aboard, to cast her into foreign lands where no allies dwell. The exile is softer than flame, yet it carries its own death, for to be stripped of home, crown and kin is to wander as a ghost while still alive. The king does not appear. His absence hangs heavy, an unspoken judgment of its own. The people murmur. Some say he mourns her privately, others that he sanctioned her end to save his throne. Either way, his silence ensures her ruin. You watch as the queen turns to the crowd. Her voice, though hoarse, carries. She proclaims her innocence once more, swearing she has never lain with demons, that her enemies twist shadows into substance. Some boo, others cheer, but many fall silent. Her words linger in the air, fragile yet unbroken, a final defiance. If fire is chosen, the flames catch quickly. The wood crackles, smoke billows, sparks leap upward. The crowd gasps as heat drives them back. She stands bound, the fire climbing, her figure blurred by smoke. Her cry is swallowed by the roar of flame, her body consumed, her story sealed in ash. If exile is chosen, the ship pulls from shore as townsfolk jeer and throw stones. She stands on deck, her figure shrinking against the horizon, the sea swallowing her as surely as fire would have. The people cheer, convinced their land is purged, though her absence feels like a wound not easily closed. Either way, the punishment is less about justice than about spectacle. The people demand a show, the church delivers it, and the queen, whether in ash or exile, becomes the symbol they require, proof that the devil can be cast out, even from a throne. You realize as the smoke curls or the sails fade, that her story does not end here. It only changes shape. For whether burned to ash or cast upon the waves, she will not vanish. She will live on in whispers, in tales, in the uneasy silence that follows when a crowd disperses from watching a queen destroyed. The square empties slowly, as though the people cannot quite leave behind the spectacle they demanded. Some return to their homes with a sense of righteousness, convinced they have witnessed justice. Others carry unease, the image of the queen bound in fire or fading into exile, gnawing at their sleep. A few dare to whisper doubts, though never loudly. To question her guilt is to question the church, and that is far more dangerous than doubting a queen. But history does not rest. The chronicles take up their quills, scribes ink her story into parchment, and word spreads far beyond the city walls. In monasteries, the tale is copied and recopied, framed as a warning. Beware the woman who seeks knowledge. Beware the queen who questions priests. Beware the bride who does not bend. Each retelling trims her humanity, sharpening her into a parable of sin. In taverns, the memory grows more colourful. Travellers insist they saw the flames leap twice as high when she screamed, or that the sea itself hissed when her ship carried her away. Some claim her eyes glowed red to the last, others that her body vanished before death, carried away by her demon lovers. Exaggeration is no flaw, it is fuel, and the tale burns brighter for it. Yet not all remember her as a monster. Among women, especially midwives and healers, her name is whispered with something like reverence. They recall her curiosity, her herbs, her defiance. To them she is not a demon's consort, but a martyr to knowledge. A woman undone by the fear of men. Quietly, in cottages and gardens, her story is retold, not as caution but as inspiration, proof that strength carries danger, yet also dignity. You trace the aftermath in the kingdom itself. The court, though triumphant in appearance, remains uneasy. A queen destroyed leaves a wound not easily hidden. The king rules on, but whispers cling to him too, that he was weak, that he abandoned his wife, that he feared her power. His enemies exploit the scandal, shaping it into leverage. The church basks in its authority, boasting that it rooted out evil, yet even it cannot silence the private doubts of those who wonder if justice was twisted by politics. The Queen's story lingers in songs, in sermons, in gossip. Decades later, children still play games of Catch the Demon Queen. Monks still thunder warnings about women who read too much, think too freely, or walk too proudly. And somewhere in the margins of history, a few daring hands jot quiet notes of sympathy, hinting that the truth was never so simple. Her life has ended, but her legacy has just begun. And you realize now that this is the cruelest fate of all. She is gone, yet her name has become a tool, wielded by others for generations, sometimes to warn, sometimes to inspire, but never again her own. Years pass, then decades, and still her name refuses to die. You walk through marketplaces in distant towns, and hear scraps of the tale spoken as if it happened yesterday. The witch queen, they call her, the one who lay with demons. Some whisper it with terror, others with a sly grin, as though savouring the scandal all over again. Her humanity has dissolved into myth, and myths travel faster than truth ever could. Chroniclers pen her into moral tales, setting her alongside Eve and Jezebel as a warning to all women who dare to rise above their station. In sermons, priests thunder her story to frighten congregations. See how the proud queen fell. See how even the highborn cannot escape the devil's embrace. She becomes less a woman than a symbol, her body and soul reshaped into a lesson that keeps people fearful and obedient. But you notice something else too. Not all who tell her story mean it as condemnation. Among women who practice medicine in secret, she becomes a patron saint of sorts, unofficial, unacknowledged, but cherished nonetheless. They whisper her name as they mix herbs, as if to remind themselves that their knowledge, though feared, has lineage. To them, the witch queen is not damned, but defiant, a figure who carried learning in a world that sought to strip it away. Travellers embroider her myth further. In some villages, they claim she walks still, veiled in shadow, appearing at crossroads at midnight. In others, they say storms rise when her name is spoken, proof that she lingers in the world, neither saint nor sinner, but something in between. Children dare one another to whisper her title into the dark, as if expecting her demon lover to appear at their shoulder. Centuries later, poets take up her tale, painting her not as villain, but as tragic heroine undone by fear and envy. Artists sketch her surrounded by demons, yet their lines betray fascination as much as horror. Each retelling layers new meaning, until no one can say what is true. Was she victim or witch, scholar or sinner, queen or monster? Perhaps she was all of these, or none. And here you stand, at the end of her story, realizing that legends rarely belong to those who live them. They belong to the world that remembers, reshaping them again and again. The witch queen who slept with demons will always exist somewhere between fear and desire, truth and invention. She is not gone. She never will be. And now, as the candles burn low and the hall falls silent, let yourself drift gently from this story. You have walked through her rise and fall, through whispers and trials, through fire and exile, and finally into the realm of legend. The voices that once accused her have long since faded into dust. The judges who condemned her are forgotten, yet her name lingers, softened by the centuries, transformed from accusation into mystery. Breathe slower now, as though matching the rhythm of the past. Picture the stone walls crumbling into ruins, ivy curling where guards once stood. Hear the faint hush of wind moving through empty corridors, carrying only echoes. No more chains, no more fire, only stillness. The queen's story is finished, but your own night continues, safe, quiet, far from the fears that once haunted her. If you close your eyes, imagine her walking not in chains but freely, her gown brushing through tall grass, her gaze turned skyward. Perhaps the demons were never real. Perhaps they were simply shadows cast by those too afraid of her light, and in the soft dark of night, those shadows cannot harm you. So rest now, knowing that even the harshest stories soften with time. The witch queen, who once frightened a kingdom, is only a whisper now, a dream slipping away with the dawn. Let go of her fire, her sorrow, her legend, and let yourself drift into calm. Sleep gently. Sleep deeply. The story is over. Good night. Sweet dreams.